this week we are going to be learning all about fossils. Our theme is fossil fun, and we're going to be talking to you a little bit about our fossil itself, our Acro, and then we'll also be talking a little bit about the people that discovered fossils, how they are made, and what they tell us about the dinosaurs and other ancient organisms. So we're going to go ahead and get started with an overview PowerPoint, so we're going to go ahead. So the fossil that we have here at the museum is called the Acrocanthosaurus aitiocensis. The name means high-spined lizard because acro had a spine that goes along their back. It was raised up a little bit, so it was a little bit higher than your normal spine. This dinosaur is the Oklahoma State dinosaur. It lived during the early Cretaceous period, which would have been 110 to 115 million years ago. It was the largest dinosaur in its ecosystem, and it preyed on dinosaurs like sauropods and ornithopods and ankylosaurs, and she reproduced by laying eggs. So, what is a fossil? A fossil is the remains or traces of plants or animals that lived long ago. They typically give scientists clues about the past. Actually, everything that we know about dinosaurs comes from fossils. Since none of them are no longer living, that's the only way that paleontologists are able to obtain information about them, to know what they were like, where they lived, different things about them. So fossils are super important to this field of study. How do fossils form? Most form when the remains of living things turn into stone. There are several other ways that they are formed, and we'll talk about those here in just a little bit, but the most basic way is just when a living organism changes into stone in some form or method. It's usually formed from the hard parts of living things, so shells or bones are the most common things that you'll find fossils made out of. They often happen when many layers of different elements like water, rock, or sand buries on top of the remains of an animal. Once they're buried, the body tissues of the animals will slowly be replaced with minerals that dissolve in underground water, so it leaves behind kind of like an impression. These minerals then harden to stone after millions of years. So like I said, fossils are like ancient. They're millions and millions of years old, so they've been around for a very, very long time. So they've had plenty of time to harden and set up to make a good specimen for paleontologists to study. So these are just some different types of fossils that we're going to talk about here in just a few minutes. So one of them is preserved in amber. We have cast fossils, turned to stone fossils, trace fossils, and then also mold fossils. So we'll go ahead and get started talking about each one of these. The first one that we're going to talk about are fossils that are preserved in amber. So you can see in here this has a spider that's kind of preserved in this yellowy substance here. So basically what this kind of fossil is the remains of an ancient organism that's become trapped in amber. So amber is a sticky liquid that oozes out of some trees. Some might call it a resin. And when the liquid hardens and sets up, that's when it's called amber. The fossilized form is called amber. And that makes the organism inside perfectly preserved because it's so hard and it sets up so well. Another form of fossil is turned to stone. We talked about this a minute ago. But pretty much this is the most common form of fossil. You can see it a lot of times. I don't know if any of you have heard of the petrified forest. It's out in the southwest in Arizona. But these are basically a bunch of really old trees that have turned to stone. So basically they're like rocks now. But you can see there, that's an example of some petrified wood. So they can actually, tree trunks can turn to stone just like bones can. And like I said, it's by a process called petrification. And it's the most common form. Another example of a fossil is a mold. So sometimes an organism will sink into super soft mud or dirt, and eventually over time that mud or dirt will turn to rock. And so over time the body of the organism also dissolves, but the shape that they made while they were in the rock still is like existing. So it leaves this impression in here. And so that impression is called a mold, so that's where that comes from. And now we move on to a cast, which is pretty much the exact opposite of a mold. So it, like I said, it first forms as a mold, and it creates a hollow, empty shape once the organism dissolves. And then, once it has that empty space in there, the certain minerals from water will slowly begin to fill up that mold, and then they'll start to crystallize inside, so they form another solid. And eventually these minerals will completely fill the mold, and it makes a copy of the original shape, so you're left with basically a copy of what the organism would have looked like, and that's called a cast. And the final type of fossil that we're going to talk about today are called trace fossils. So trace fossils are a little different from the ones we've talked about previously. Occasionally different aspects of a dinosaur's life, so like their footprints, their eggs, nests, even their dung will turn into fossils. And these are called trace fossils because they are traces or signs of that animal's life, rather than just a fossilized body part. These trace fossils are most important for helping scientists learn how these extinct animals once lived, and they're most telltale in how they moved, what they ate, etc. And they use things like geographic location, the type of rock it's found in, to learn more about that animal and how it lived. Alright, so this is the end of our PowerPoint. So in the next video, we are going to take you guys on a visit to Acro, learn a little bit more about her, and we will see you guys in the next one.